Well, hello, everybody. Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. I am so excited. We have here the writer, director, Viggo Mortensen, of his new film, Falling, and one of my favorite actors, the iconic Lance Henriksen. I actually want to just quickly read a quote from the Hollywood Reporter about the film. It's John DeFiore says, as intelligent and sensitive a directing debut as you'd expect, and a highlight of Henriksen's career. And it is, Lance, I wanted to tell you and start with you that I mentioned what an iconic actor you are. I've adored you ever since Dog Days Afternoon, but you have never had such a meteor role, and is such a delight for fans of you to finally see you in such a meaty role. I'm going to use that term again. I want to ask you, because I've seen the film twice, I mentioned, and there is so much subtlety in your performance, but at the same time, there is a ferocity. There is an animalistic quality to your performance. Can you address that calibration of a performance that has very small nuances, but at the same time has that violence, that brutality to it?
Well, there are two sides to that coin. One is you're in a movie that was written for you. I mean, with you in mind, and it's so full of life and so full of detail that I felt like once I got into the river, I wasn't going to get out of it. I was going to stay with it the whole time. And one scene led to the next, and the next. And I realized I was living this world, with my son, and I had a past, and I understood the past really well. And it was very, very meaty in that way, that it was loaded with detail. I mean, tremendous detail. And also, my life as a person outside of acting had a lot of things in it that lent itself to the outrage that he felt about being fixed and being stepped over mentally by
Hmm.
us, and failed at so many things that all he wanted to do now, I think, the life raft he was holding on to was that farm, and
Hmm.
he was trying to desperately to hold on to it both now and when he would come back from being sort of lost. So and then there would be moments of clear, pristine vision of his son. And there did end up being some of that. And it was a powerful role to try to do. It really was. And Viggo had written it, and he's a great storyteller. And so the details involved were incredible. I mean, the amount of details and the amount of twists and turns were wonderful to as an actor to risk doing, try to do
Hmm.
well. The rest I don't know about. I mean, I mean, it's almost like learning to play a violin. Now I know how to play a violin, so I feel pretty good about it.
Vigo, what was it about this story that you felt so compelled to make it your directing and debut? I mentioned to you earlier that I was so impressed the layers to the film. The fact that we're living in a world of memories, we're living in a world of perceptions, and then actuality, and the convergence of those three worlds. Can you address that?
Well, it's it took me a long time. I mean, I tried with other screenplays I'd written over the years, starting 25 years ago, to make a movie that I'd written and would direct. And it's, I never was able to raise enough money to do it, basically. And with Falling, it took 2, 3 times before we found just enough money to shoot it. And the story itself, it was something I wrote after my mother's funeral. You know, she had had dementia, like Lance's character does in the story. My father was in the beginning stages of it. There's been a lot of that in our family, both sides, my dad's and my mom's side. And I've seen that up close. So it has a little bit to do with that, my desire to write this story. But it was also, I was just thinking about my mom all the time. It was kind of inspired by things I remembered about her, things I've learned from her. But the more I thought about her, the more I thought about my dad, and I thought about their dynamic and the relationship that I had and my brothers had, which is why I dedicate the movie to Charles and Walter Mortensen, my brothers. Because even though it's a fictional story, there's some elements that are from our shared, you know, upbringing, childhood, and that's why I dedicate it to them. And I was, not just because of the dementia aspect, which has a lot to do with memory and how someone's present becomes quite different than other people's presence. You know, I wanted to capture that faithfully. There's been a lot of movies. There's even 1 or 2 this year that deal with that. People that have dementia. And sometimes there's an effort even made to see the world from the point of view of the person ailing from it and so forth. But in my experience, I had never really seen something where the person isn't just confused, but where they have a legitimate view. They're not confused usually, because they see and feel these things. It's real to them. And usually it's the observers who are confused.
Correct. Yeah. It's the caretakers that are the ones that are confused.
Exactly. So we were trying to do that. And I think we succeeded thanks to Lance's amazing performance and then just the tools at hand, visually and sound and all that. And so it does deal, like you say, with memory and in a way, it's not so much, you know, you call them flashbacks, but they're really true memories, subjective memories. Sometimes they're from Lance's point of view, sometimes they're from my character's point of view, sometimes they're kind of shared, somewhat objective. Sometimes there's a little bit that's from Sarah, my sister's point of view, the character played by Laura Linney, who's wonderful in the movie as well.
Yeah, she's terrific.
And yeah, this idea that how subjective memory is, it just seems, when I was at my mom's funeral, before I started writing this, I was hearing stories that I was familiar with about my mom. But they were different. Each time I heard it from somebody, oh, that time that this happened, it's like, that's not how I remember it, but it's interesting. So I wanted to write all these things down. I wrote down these different views on the same events and the same people, and then some new stories. And I just saw this collection of things I'd written down so as not to forget. And I just thought it would have the makings of a good story where you could explore. In this case, it became a fictional story where the father and son are at the center, and there's, you know, it's a very conflictual relationship. It's a drama that doesn't have the usual conflict at the center, though, because it's not 2 people fighting each other. It's one person attacking another person, consciously making an effort based on past experience not to fight back. So it's like the tension is created by one person backing up, in a way, backing up until they can't back up anymore, you know, and then something happens. And, you know, it's just, the memory is crucial. And so we do that with images, you know, and just a slightly different tone visually, even in terms of sound. It's subtle. I didn't want to have scenes from the past that were like, you know, different film stock or different, you know, black and white. I just wanted it to be very subtle, you know, to layer sort of subjective points of view throughout. And sometimes you're not quite sure who's remembering it. And that's okay, because we tend to confuse, you know, our memories evolve. We think the past, you know, the present's confusing, never more so than now in our country, certainly. And the future is unknown, but we think, well, the past, we can count on that. I've got pictures, I got videos, I got diary entries, I've got stories I've been told by people. And yet pictures, diary entries, These are not facts. They're done from someone's point of view, shot from someone's point of view. And memory seems to change. Our memory of things evolves as we grow older. So they're not very reliable. I don't think, I think we edit the things we remember. Both Willis does it in the story, but so does John, his son, and others. We try to control the past in a way so that we can feel comfortable in the present and just deal with what seems to be reality. And I was just playing with that idea. And, these days, obviously communication is a big problem in our country and in other places, not just among politicians, but in the population. There's a lot of polarization, and it's like, we got to figure out a way to do this, man. We got to talk. It's not going to work if we don't. It can't go on like this forever. But how do you do it? How do you talk with someone who doesn't seem to want to talk with you, doesn't see you, doesn't accept you, and vice versa? Both people. Lance brought up the idea of earlier, we were talking about not wanting people to try to fix him, right?
Correct.
And both people, he wants me to be a certain way. I'm not the man he thought I would turn out to be when I was his son, a young boy. And he's not the father I wish I had. But at some point, you got to accept what's in front of you. That's where you got to start. It's like, okay, what are we dealing with? I need to accept you before I can even consider suggesting you change. It's like, what am I looking at? And what is he looking at, And so it's just the idea of communication. And as we've gotten closer to the release of the movie, which will be February 5th, the way things have gone in the country, it just seems more and more timely, this aspect of, it's the other pandemic.
Yeah.
Poor communication or no communication. It's a pandemic that's going to last longer. It's not going to be fixed by a vaccine. It's like, it's only going to be fixed by people like making some sacrifices and adapting, to each other.
There are other themes, and Viggo is quite a complex narrative. There are other themes like the views of masculinity and the evolution of the views of masculinity, and also you present us with this traditional model of what a family is, and then it evolves, and Willis is confronted with this new family, or it has evolved. Can you address those themes?
Well, they're not meant to be like inclusive of everything that happens. This is just one family or extended family story, but it's true. There's the character I play, Lance's son in the movie, is in a relationship with a man named Eric. That's his husband, and they have an adopted child, Monica, who's a 8-year-old girl, Central American little girl that they've adopted. And the main difference isn't that it happens to be two men rather than the more traditional heterosexual family unit, parental kind of team. The main thing is the communication difference. That's a family that overcomes differences of opinion through communication and empathy, that's the main difference between the Willis patriarchal model, where what he says goes. It's kind of, he's a person of his generation, and I work hard, and when I come in, I expect to have the food ready, and what I say goes. The final decisions are always mine, and everybody has to adapt to me. I'm not going to evolve with you in a relationship. I'm not going to evolve with the changing times. They have to adapt to me. Everybody has to adapt to me. And so that's the difference. Our unit is different. So is Laura Linney's character. Her family is quite different. We meet her and her teenage daughter and son. They're quite different. And being of a different generation, they don't have the baggage that, say, Sarah and I have, where we're defensive and we're, always sparring with our father. They're kind of like, they just let it rip. They don't take any crap from Grandpa, you know, really. But they're they find him amusing until he's not, you know, but they don't have the same baggage with him, obviously. And our daughter, and Lance could speak to this, he had a great relationship with the young actress, Gabby Velas, who plays Monica. Just like in the story, they're best pals. She can do no wrong. And as far as she's concerned, her grandfather, Willis, can do no wrong. She doesn't sit in judgment of him. She's not trying to make him different in the way that I am or my sister
Not affect him at all. No. Yeah, that's the most beautiful relationship for me in the whole movie almost. I mean, every time I'm around her, I feel free and happy and willing and, you know, all of those things. I even give her my prized possession, my watch.
Your watch, correct.
Yeah, yeah. And it meant a lot to me because her innocence was purified. It was as if she was, you know, a thing that you put the drops in and steams water into your bedroom at night. You know what I mean? It's pure. And I felt peace around her constantly.
There's also Laura Linney's teenage family that are not affected by grandfather. You know,
That's right. You're right.
They seem to be.
It's almost like you go like this, you know, I'm hollering at him, but you know what I mean? I mean, I'm right. And they go, I don't care if you're right or wrong.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Lance, how was it difficult? I mean, this is a very homophobic man, and he spews out a lot of vitriol. Was difficult for you to
Yes.
inhabit
Yes.
that?
I don't like to brutalize anybody. I really don't. I don't like that. And I remember doing a scene with Laura Linney where I was remembering a girl or someone, one of my wives, where we were making love by the full moon and there were ducks quacking and all that stuff. And I was saying it to her like it was her. That's my daughter I'm talking to. And it was very hard for me to do that scene. It really was.
It was funny because Lance, this was towards the end of the shoot. I remember that moment. And you had said and done the most horrible things for weeks. We're almost done with the shoot. And we're shooting that moment where he looks at her and he mistakes her for probably the love of his life, I guess, you know, his first wife.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he looks her in the eyes and he says, it's beautiful on both their part, both Lance and Laura. He says, except that time we were making love, you know, he uses another word for making love, but under the full moon, remember? And he looks at her and she's like horrified. Oh my God, my dad thinks I've just had sex with him. And it's, you know, 60 years ago or something. And she doesn't know what to do. She just sort of hangs in there. And when Lance went to do this, you know, and keep in mind, he'd been saying and doing the most outrageous things the whole movie shoot, as he was supposed to, right? And going for it, you know. And but he does the first take and he's just looking at the table and he's just blushing and he's mumbling. And I'm like, that was it was an interesting choice. Who knows, Lance? Let's do another take where I think you need to look at her because that's what freaks her out, you know. That's what's upsets her, you know. And so he does the second take and he looks at her, but he flicks his eyes away and he's sort of muttering. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, you're going to be shy on me now? You're not even... and Laura says, what did she say? I'm a tough broad. I can take it, Lance. Come on, just give it to me. And then he did the third take and he was still kind of blushing, but it just felt like passion. It was really good.
Like I had remembered the purity of, you know, sweating under a full moon. I don't remember. And ducks.
You're both naked. You've just made love, and you're looking into her eyes. Kind of.
It was like, oh my God.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful, but it was just really funny. But that's because you are a decent, generous, kind person. I mean, anybody who only sees you in this movie would think, geez, where'd they find that guy? He's holy terror. But
Sverren, the actor that plays, I'm fascinated with that character because I mean it is a younger version of Willis, but he becomes almost like a conduit between between the older Willis and your character, Viggo. Can you tell us about that dynamic of creating that third character that is actually the younger version of
Yeah.
Willis?
Well, Sverrir Gunnarsson, who's a Icelandic actor who lives and works in Sweden, like Lance, also a wonderful, kind man. But like Lance, if they're not smiling and they're just looking dead at you, like the way Lance is looking at us right now, it's like you're looking into the eyes of a wolf. It's kind of intimidating. It can be. And we've seen Lance play characters that are pretty
Yep.
scary, right? So he has that power. And to find the younger version of Willis, those were big shoes to fill. I was like, I needed an actor with a certain presence, and we're really lucky we got Sverrir. He really nailed it. And when we got, months before we really had the money to shoot or anything, we all got together. Sverrir was in California for doing some work, and I said, let's go see Lance. So we went out and drove out to the desert where Lance lives, and we spent a long time together reading through all the scenes, playing. I played the other parts to those guys, and they would play. Sometimes Lance read some of the scenes of the younger version of himself that Sverrir had to do.
Oh, wow.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
And we just tried everything. We filmed it, and I was, I think you guys will find a way to meld together, because it is one character, and we're going to see it alternating all the time. And I'm caught in the middle, and there is a certain resemblance. There's enough of a physical, it's a bridge, I work as a bridge between them, as you say, and that it really worked thanks in large part to Sverrir playing the part and the way he played it. And it was great to watch the two of them, Lance and Sverrir, starting that initial work, those initial days, because without me even saying anything, they were already sort of picking up on each other's mannerisms and just little subtle things. So by the time we shot it, it was like a younger version of Lance in his body language, his walk, certain. Just the way he
there was a moment
react.
in that birthday scene where she's giving him some crap, from my point of view. But anyway, she's giving and he takes a cigarette out of his mouth and says, he just walked away and said, "Fuck this," And it was exactly the way I would have done it, because there was a certain amount of pouting in it, a little edge of pout, and I thought, wow, he nailed that one. He really nailed it. I mean, it was, it always starts with a pout,
Yeah. And then in the reverse, Lance, how did that process help you embody the older Willis?
Well, we had worked a lot more, about my life, the things that were bugging me. I want to feed my horses. I love my horses. I'm going to get, and him and I were arguing. I'd say, don't use so much rock salt. That shit's expensive, and he would say, oh, you're going to feed your horses again? I already fed them. I said, you mind if I go see my horses? It was always a way. And if we weren't using the sharp side of the knife, we were using the back side of the knife. But it was like almost like warding each other off. I don't want to feel you. I just want to be here. I'm glad you're here. Good. But it was all about always about something else. I honestly believe that
something unresolved.
Unresolved stuff. To keep it unresolved
Until
resolve it. You know what I mean?
Until it comes out.
Yeah, it's such a good script, because it always kept me off balance. I mean, I don't know why I did that to him. I'll forget about it. It was like, let's get on with life. I want to feed my horses. That's it. And then the next moment comes up, and the next, and the next.
But that's the way you did it. You did it one step at a time, and it was
Uh,
beautiful to watch. I mean, I wasn't originally going to act in the movie, but I ended up doing it
I'm
mainly
thinking
because
you
it
did.
seemed like we could raise the money. But being in those scenes with him, it was, I mean, I had the best seat in the house to watch the construction of this character as he was going along. And Lance would always say, don't let me get caught acting, whatever happens here. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen from what I'm seeing you do every day. But yeah, no, we'll get it right each time. We're not going to walk away. And Lance was very, but it was, there would be times where I'd be acting in a scene with him, and there would be something, a reaction or a transition mentally from one mental state to another, or just a particular line reading. I would have never thought of someone doing it that way, where it was just right. And I would be thinking, even as I was acting with him, that's great. I can't wait to get in the editing room with that. That's, you know what I mean? And that'd be like, oh, it's my turn now, you know. But it was, I gotta say, Lance, it was a pleasure just to watch you build that. It's a very, I mean, it was a very brave, very honest, never saw you acting performance. And it was constantly surprising, you know, and it's a very difficult character to make engaging, you know, and there's maybe some people that go, oh, I can't, you know, I don't want to listen to that. I mean, why does it go so far? It's like, well, that happens in life, you know, people tend
It
to
does.
go and go. And it was intentional storytelling wise. And we knew that's what we were trying for. He had to go way too far repetitively and just like excruciatingly, because so we could earn what happens in the latter part
Mhm.
of the story.
Yeah.
But that being said, Lance never once did anything to thinking, oh, I want the audience to like me or think I'm this or that. He just, this is what this needs right now, and maybe even more. And he
Mhm.
was, you know, and fortunately we had the rest of the cast and the whole crew was really supportive, which helps actors tremendously. And obviously it helps the director too, when it's not just a job, but where people are emotionally involved, telling you stories about their family every day. Somebody would come up and tell us something. Oh, this reminds me of that. This
So
reminds,
on our side. It
Yeah.
really,
or that you'd suddenly finish a take. I mean, there were some scenes, that were more sort of difficult emotional scenes where people, you know, really were moved. I mean, in the crew, just these sort of,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
I
big
want to
time.
ask you about it's almost unbearable to watch the big confrontational scene that the two of you have towards the end of the film. You know, can you, Lance, take us to how was it shooting that scene?
Oh, are you talking about the fight?
The fight, yeah. I mean, the one where you're in the chair and
That was almost a purge in a way. It was almost a purge. Neither one of us could take any more. Again, there's that whole idea of I stop fixing me. I'm just fine the way I am. I don't fix
Mhm.
me anymore. Right. And I would have to disclaimer about the neighbor and this happened and that happened. And I'm sick of it all. I know why it happened. And, you know, I felt very strong about my right not to be fixed. And anyway, when we finally had a blowout, we went to a place where there was nowhere else to go, in a way. And in a sense, it was like if you were fighting for love instead of rejecting love, what you would end up with is nowhere else to go except the thing itself. And I did, you know, it proves in a lot of ways that I love my son, totally love him, but I didn't know how. I'm already slipping off track and all over the place. And I need to be fixed before I can be pure and be, you know, I'm not that guy. I'm a farmer. I'm a guy that labors, and my labor should buy me dinner on time. That kind of shit, that kind of difficulty. There were some moments toward the very end of the movie where I felt I'm showing it as much as I possibly can that I care about you, and I now I got to go die, or live for another 50 years. I mean, you can call me.
Remember how the crew was that day? Remember how when we were doing that scene, how the crew was? They were so with us, right?
We tried it, and then we said, look, it's not where we want it, so let's leave it alone for a day, Viggo said. And then they shot some other scenes, and the next day we came in. And whatever we dreamt that night, whatever went through us before we started that scene again, it took on an absolute honesty and integrity. It went somewhere that neither one of us imagined, and I remember we finished the scene, and I was holding my son, and we had gone to the raw edge of the razor, the sharp edge. And then I walked around the corner when we stopped, cut the scene, finished it. In a sense, we finished that part of it. And I walked around the corner, and the crew was in the room where they have all the monitors for all of these things. And it was crowded. All of our guys had gone into that room to watch us do that scene. And they were crying.
Wow.
Something struck a truth that was universal enough for them to feel that way, even maybe about their life or about someone else's, but whatever. And I remember when the movie screened, my agent was sitting a couple of rows down from me, and at the end of the movie, which is very close to that, he was crying. And I said, wait a minute. In my mind, I said, agents don't cry. I mean, it was like the movie really affects people, and I think the only way that it all worked was the brilliance of Viggo. I hate to use those kind of words, Viggo, but I really feel that. The brilliance of his writing and his passion about this story, which is very personal in so many ways, is that it was truthful.
Yeah. Well, you're brilliant too, Lance. You do quite an amazing job. And that scene, it is unbearable to watch because of the honesty. And I think we all have unresolved issues with our dads, and you guys bring that up. And we all wish I became very emotional because I wish I'd had it out like with my dad in a way, and spoken the truth of certain things with him. And when you guys hug, I think you hug for all of, for all of us. It's really powerful. On a lighter note, Cronenberg. You've worked, of course, Viggo, with Mr. Cronenberg and Eastern Promises and History of Violence. Tell us about working with him. It is a funny scene. He's the proctologist.
I didn't know who he was.
Yeah, I didn't know that he didn't know. We're shooting in Canada, so it's a Canadian crew, and David Cronenberg is.
I've seen his movie.
A master filmmaker around the world for people, but for a Canadian crew, he's David Cronenberg walks in the room. It's like, oh, okay. And I had no idea that Lance didn't know. It was only recently, a month or two ago, where Lance Skyped me one day. He said, I just saw you and Dr. Klausner doing a Q&A about a David Cronenberg movie. What the hell? That's Cronenberg? And I'm like, yeah, you didn't know that? You mean you didn't know that when we were shooting? And you go, no.
Which I thought was outrageous. It really was.
I remember on the day saying, we finished the scene and David went home and said, how'd you feel about that? He goes, well, that Dr. Klausner, that Cronenberg guy, they keep saying Cronenberg, or whatever, I don't think you even had heard
I
his
didn't
name. He
use
was
his
named
name,
Klaus-
no.
we were calling him Klausner. That
Yeah.
Dr. Klausner that you found, I don't know where you got him, but he was kind of unsettling or something. I said, but you felt all right about it? He goes, yeah, no, it was great. He gave me a run for my money and so forth. No, I mean, David, the first time I worked with him, as you say, was History of Violence, and then Eastern Promises, and then a third movie, A Dangerous Method. And
Yeah.
I have huge respect for him as a filmmaker and as a person too. We became friends right off the bat, and we've stayed in touch.
He's a nice
And
guy, yeah.
yeah, I appreciate his sense of humor and his just, his thought process. We communicate about a lot of things, not just movies. And when I wrote, when it came time to cast that part, I thought he'd be great. He's the right age. He's the right type. He would do it really well. And I'd seen some of his acting. He's really good. And he was local. We were shooting in Ontario province in Toronto. So down the road, there he was. And I said, David, we have this, I'm shooting this movie here, and there's a part I think you'd be great for, but it's not a favor. It's not like a gimmick. I just think you'd be the ideal casting. But if you don't want to do it, it's not a problem. We'll find someone else. If you feel like it would be fun, whatever. And, so he read it and seemed interested in what color are the gloves. And I thought, okay, yeah, he's going to. And so he came in, and it was wonderful. He did a great job. And, it's been interesting. I've done Q&As, in some places in Europe where the movies come out first. And audiences like that scene. And then I've asked in several places, I've said, so how many of you raise your hand if you knew or that the person playing the proctologist, Dr. Klausner, is the filmmaker, David Cronenberg? And it'd be 10, 15% maybe.
Oh, come on.
And I said, and raise your hands if you think the scene worked and that character was well acted, and everybody, right? I said, well, that was the main goal. So I'm glad that's the most important thing. And for those of you who knew it was him, I imagine there was some extra, there was another layer to it, maybe a disturbing layer, depending on what visual associations you have with his movie.
I was thinking of Dead Ringers. And
yeah, like this is the last guy whose finger I wanted.
Right. That's why I kept cracking jokes, because I didn't want to do this at all.
You were nervous.
I didn't want to get this done. No.
Yeah.
It's a terrific scene. I mean, it is a needed humorous scene. And
yeah, I mean, it was kind of the point of no return too. It was like, okay, I have to take him back east. That's it. He's just not gonna, whatever he agreed to, he's forgotten that he's agreed to move out here. It's not gonna work. I gotta take him back home, and I'm gonna have to figure out what we do when I get there. And that leads to that argument that happens at the end. But yeah, no, it was a fun day. But there are other moments. It depends on your sense of humor. But I've watched the movie with lots of different audiences, and people do laugh at certain things. Some things that are quite dark sometimes that Lance says. It's just the way he says it, the tone he invests it with. There are some.
Yeah, no, they're
not gratuitously light or anything, but there is some humor in the movie.
Speaking of Cronenberg, your production design person, Carol Spear, is a terrific job, and also the editor, Ronald Sanders. It's a incredibly well edited film. Can you tell us about working with the two of them?
Well, I wanted to work with them just because especially with Carol, I knew her, a little better than Ron, although Ron had obviously behind the scenes had a lot to do with editing, although David Cronenberg's he knows pretty much. He shoots in a way, he's editing as he goes. So, but they're both excellent, and we're shooting in Canada, and Carol is someone who was along almost as early as Lance was. Because I went to her, I said, I'm going to shoot this movie, and I'd love for you to do the production design on it. Ron Sanders came on later, shortly before we were going to shoot, but and I'm glad he did. But Carol worked with me and with Marcel Ziskin, the Danish cinematographer that shot the movie beautifully. And the three of us were like a team doing all the preparation and scouting. And I mean, one thing I've learned from David Cronenberg and the people he works with, but his example is you can never prepare too much or too early for a shoot. And so I wanted to find those locations. I wanted to film, because I knew I wouldn't be able to have the money or the time to do it later. Those images in spring, summer, fall, and get a feel for the places we were going to work in winter. Get a feel for working together with Carol and with Marcel. I mean, Carol I knew because I'm kind of a nosy actor, and I've always been, and she welcomes that. You know, I'd always bring props and things, whether it was History of Violence, all three movies really. Eastern Promises, Dangerous Method, you know, what about this? So, well, just bring it all in and we'll look at it. And, you know, and she would find, and they would give her ideas. She might not use it. I said, it's just food for thought. I don't care, you know, if you use it or not, but this might be good, or this could be good, this book, or this, you know. So I had that kind of relationship already. And we really prepared the movie well together, I think, as a team. And in fact, I mean, I have shot in Canada before, and I know how good crews are there. I mean, they're excellent. And we had, Lance will tell you, we had an unbelievably skillful, but really engaged. And as it turned out, that was the pleasant surprise, that they were emotionally engaged as well with the story, as Lance has described earlier.
You know what? On that note, I got to say this. Viggo got flags from every nationality that was working on that set. Strung them between the trailers and the honey wagons and all of that stuff. And it was Sweden, Norway, England, all these different flags that represented all the different nationalities of the crew. You know, even if it was just second generation, didn't matter. We had them all. And they were waving in the breeze every day. They were big flags. And everybody felt represented. It was incredible. And inside the trailer, he put up all his own family personal pictures. And then people started adding their family personal pictures. And so the environment on that film was, we are all or nothing for each other, and we're represented. And I think that's what kept it that way through the whole movie. This was the most devoted crew you could imagine.
No, they were great. Well, that's the other thing I learned from someone like David Cronenberg, especially, and I've been lucky. I've worked with a lot of good directors, men, women, different nationalities, different points of view, different styles of directing. But apart from the preparation aspect, the other thing that I learned, and especially probably from David, is it's important how you communicate with the crew and with the cast. You know, the first day of shooting, I said, this is what I've learned from the best. And that is that a good idea can come from anyone at any time. And I've thought up this story. I've worked on it for years, and Lance and I have worked on it, and we've prepared it as a crew and all that. But, you know, if you have a good idea, bring it up in that moment, a question, a suggestion. Don't wait till tomorrow to tell me your good idea for today's work, because it'll be too late. It's really, I'm not going to ever feel threatened by it. That's what I've learned from someone like David Cronenberg. It's like, bring it on. You know, if we can make it better, that's great. You know, and if you prepared really well, you're relaxed and you can actually listen to suggestions and answer questions and either dismiss them politely or make use of them. And that's what we did. So everybody from the beginning felt like they were working together, and that really helped us get it done, because we had a very short time to shoot this movie. I mean, we had a tight schedule, but people really went the extra mile.
Yeah, you mentioned Marcel, you know, before Viggo, and did you guys, prior to the film starting to shoot, did you discuss how you wanted to represent memory and time? Because it is from a film geek, it's quite spectacular the way you represent memory and time.
We did work on that a lot. You know, I mean, we talked I mean, I shared a lot of photographs that I've made over the years and photographs by others. And we talked about certain movies, not like we want to copy anybody's style or any scene or any shots or anything, but just that from that angle or with that lens, we can maybe achieve a certain tone in this kind of scene. We didn't want to have a demarcation between like memory sequences and the present in the usual ways. It was just, we wanted it to be subtle. There's a certain distance or a lower angle, child's point of view, things like that, of course, but there's a slightly warmer tone. And that collaboration, Carol Spears, friend and also an excellent craftswoman, and Dixon, costume designer, we worked with her and Marcel in terms of how to capture something different from the past. It's slightly warmer colors in the clothing a little bit, and just by virtue of the fact that it's spring, summer, early fall, as opposed to dead of winter, which is when the present takes place on the farm.
Yeah.
Naturally, the sunlight has a different quality, and that's what we were going for, those little things, and they would help to just the way we burnish things and edit them and change them, as I was saying, memory, to feel comfortable in the present, like this is how I want to remember that, we did that in many subtle ways. We did work hard on that, the way we wanted those flashback sequences to work. Sometimes they're glimpses, sometimes they're whole scenes. We put a lot of work into that, and it was mostly tone. It wasn't we didn't want to artificially or in a very obvious way push you to saying, oh, look at that, or it was better than, or that's clearly a very subjective memory. No, maybe not. It had to all be real, in the same sense that Lance did this amazing dance. I mean, I think your performance is going to be remembered for a long time, Lance.
Thank you.
He did this amazing dance with going in and out of, what he's in, the early stages of dementia, in a way that he didn't treat the way he was when he's speaking about things that you're like, what is he talking about? It has to be deciphered, like he's obviously somewhere else long ago. It's not like he suddenly started acting really odd or jig or started giggling and being childish. It was like very subtle. It was the same because it was real. He's not confused. It's like he's happy or he's sad or whatever, but he's there. He's fully there. So it was a really delicate dance he was doing between different mental states, not just when he's speaking, but in his reactions to us, the others in the scenes. It was beautiful, that. And that's what we were trying to do with the lighting, with the color palette in terms of the clothing and the sets and the way the sets age, that same kitchen and the duck dinner from the past, 1962. And then in the present, which is 2009, where he's, has that Western on full blast, just like he had the radio on full blast in the earlier scene. But the place looks different. He's been sitting there by himself for years. He's filled it with all his tools. There's no woman there or anybody else to tell him not to do that in the kitchen, fix his outboard engine or his chainsaw, to not smoke 5 million cigarettes. I mean, the wallpaper is yellowed, and it just these things. It was a great collaboration between production design, costume, camera work, props, and the actor.
It's almost miraculous. I mean, when I think back on the locations, there could have been no better farm. There couldn't have been any better house. I mean, the whole thing, it had a texture that everybody contributed to keep it simple and beautiful, and to me, it was beautiful. I mean, even my stinky barns, they were beautiful to me. I mean,
well, you made it yours. It was believable at all times that it was your place.
I'll never forget it. It's
Well,
unbelievable.
I need to point out something to the two of you that I've been doing so many Q&As via Zoom with collaborators, and it's so palpable camaraderie that the two of you have for each other, the admiration, and it's palpable. I've never seen anything like this all through COVID. You know, you
Thank you for,
We had an unforgettable experience telling the story together.
for the
And
rest
Lance,
of our lives. It'll be part of
yeah.
mine. They'll fit in just like my scars.
yeah.
well, you were with it, you know, from the early days when I had that first version of the script, and you hung in there as we found the money, lost the money, found the money, lost the money again. When we finally started, I lied to Lance, basically. I said, hey, Lance, I called him up and I said, we're going to make the movie now, finally. Are you still willing to? You know, we hadn't spoken in half a year or something. And he said, yeah. And I said, it's kind of an odd pause. You know, I mean, it's not like forced labor. You don't have to, it's not an obligation. I want you to want to do it. He said, no, I want to. I was just thinking about it. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be a pain in the ass, really. It's going to be, I go, it's going to be difficult. I go, no, I know. But not just the text and not the demands emotionally of the role, the dimension, all that, but where I'm have to go personally. And I understood that as I got to know Lance more and his past, his childhood. It's like, oh yeah, if you're gonna go that way, you're gonna go to some dark places. And so I'm grateful to him that he hung in there, because I said to him, okay, we're gonna do this now. And we went off, Marcel and I and Carol, and found the locations in the spring, summer, and we started shooting, because I wanted to have this footage, this library of footage for the memories. And what I didn't tell Lance is we didn't have any money yet. I was just saying, Marcel, plane ticket, bring your camera. If we start making a movie, maybe it'll be contagious and people will think, hey, they're making a movie. Let's go see what they're doing. And they'll join us, which fortunately happened. And even when we started shooting, we were there in the winter and about to go. And the producer came over and said to me, which I also didn't tell Lance. He said, well, you don't have money to shoot the 7 weeks you wanted to shoot, 35 days. I said, oh, what do we got, 6 weeks? He goes, you got 5. I said, you want to wait till next year? I said, no. We got everybody, we're ready. We got to do this. And he said, okay, just know that in 2 weeks, your money runs out. That's all we got. What do you mean 2 weeks? He goes, well, we have enough for that. I said, I thought you said 5 weeks. I said, well, that's the idea. I said, and he said, we got 2 weeks worth. And so it's up to you. And I said, let's go. We'll be all right.
Oh, yeah.
And I got so into it with Lance and everybody, and we were having a great time, but also suffering. Telling the story was hard. I completely forgot that. And a couple of weeks later, my Canadian co-producer, Dan Beckerman, came over and says, we're good. You can finish the movie. And I said, what? He said, you guys, we can finish the movie. I said, of course we're going to finish the movie. It's going great. And he goes, no, but I mean, you have enough money to finish the movie.
Oh God.
I didn't tell you that. I didn't tell Lance that either.
No, it's better.
We figured it.
I wouldn't have done anything. I would just say, let's keep going.
Okay.
Well,
Put it on my iPhone if we have to.
I'm so glad you guys were able to finish it, and I want to thank you both for joining me. I adore the two of you. I adore your film, and it's been quite an honor to chat with you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
See you up
likewise.
there someday. I'll come up.
I'm going to hold you to it. I'm
Yeah,
going to hold you to
I'll
it.
do that. You bet.
Wow.
I hope it's not too late to wish you and whoever's out there watching this conversation a happy and healthy 2021. And I wish that to the people you don't like, and even to the people you don't know. Let's all try to get on that wavelength.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Lance.
Hey, thank you, Viggo. I love seeing. Okay.